Welcome to your video class for today. For counterpoint, we're going to be looking at assignment 10, which you should have completed by now. If you have not, go do that. Complete it. This is the worksheet I gave you in class for invertible counterpoint. Once you get that completed, go and take the survey that I posted in the class site on D2L and let me know that you completed it so I can give you credit for that. And you need to do that by Wednesday. If you don't do it Wednesday, it's late. Alright, so let's look at assignment 10, this worksheet on invertible counterpoint. And I believe the worksheet itself said homework 6, but it is in this class assignment 10. So here we are, our first two items, and we did this first one in class. So hopefully you got that answer down in class, but just review. Here's our original, with the top voice being the eighth notes here, the bottom voice being the dotted half notes. In the invertible part of it here, the top voice remains exactly where it was. Starts on E, D, E. And the bottom voice, the dotted half notes, C, B natural, if you notice, are transposed up an octave. C, B natural. So this would be invertible counterpoint at the octave, because one voice stays the same, the other voice moves an octave. So you should have just wrote octave in the blank here. All right, number two, our original here. The top line begins with melody on G. Bottom line begins with the half note on G. So these two voices switch relative positions. Now the top voice, what was the material here in the top, is now here in the bottom, beginning again on G and going up, but now it's moved down 2 octaves. The top voice, or the bottom voice, excuse me, becomes a top voice. Started on G, and here it starts on D, so it has moved up an octave and a fifth. Okay, we don't worry about when we're dealing with multiples of octaves more than 2. We certainly don't worry about the multiples of those, and when you're dealing with intervals other than the octave, you don't worry about the multiples. So we have an octave and a fifth is a 12th. So this should have come up with invertible counterpoint at the 12th. Okay. So again, don't worry about that. The one voice moved an octave or 2 octaves. The fact that the other voice moved an actual 12th gives you your answer. So again, invertible counterpoint at the 12th. All right, moving on to number 3. So here we have the original. The top voice has moved down here to the bass clef. The bottom voice has moved up. Now this one's a little more difficult because it actually changes keys. The original is an A minor. The G sharp there gives that away. This next, the invertible version is in E minor. So we go from A minor to E minor. Okay, but if you again look at how far each voice moves, that's going to add those two intervals together. That will give you the answer. Okay, so excuse me. Or you can transpose this version here back to A minor and then go from there. So either way works. So if we look at it, just how the voices have moved. So the lower voice here is EDE, so it moves up here to BAB, so that's moving up a fifth. The upper voice starts on E, goes to A. This is B to E, so that has moved down basically an octave and a fourth. Okay, don't worry about the octave. You have a fifth plus a fourth together. That makes an octave. Okay, so if you put invertible counterpoint at the octave, that would be correct. Now, if you transposed it back to the key of A minor, depending on how you did that, if you moved it down a fifth or up a fourth, you might have gotten that they both moved an octave from the original position. Um, if you did that, well, it depends on how if you transposed it up a fourth. Okay, so that this line here starts on E up here. This line here would start on the E there. Okay, that means both would have moved an octave. That would have been a 15th. Or if you moved it down a fourth, or down a fifth, excuse me, so that this bottom voice, this EDE, stays on that, then the top voice moves down 2 octaves. So you might have gotten 15th. Okay, I would accept either answer on this because again, it's a little confusing when you're dealing with transposing voices. Okay, basically, invertible counterpoint at the octave and 15th are in the same category of intervals, and so either answer is acceptable on this particular item. Okay. All right, let's move on to our next set of items. There's a numbering mistake here, so there is no number 4 on the page, so it's 5, 6, and 7. The original here is used for all 3 of these, so we're going to compare all 3 of these back to this original. Okay, so the first one here, number 5, this one's fairly simple. So the top voice, again, moves down the bass clef. So it begins D, C, B, and here it is, D, C, B flat, D, C, B flat. Okay, so let's move down 2 octaves. The lower voice stays right where it was. So you have the upper voice moving down 2 octaves, upper voice of the invertible staying in its original position. So that's invertible counterpoint at, whoops, go back here, invertible counterpoint at the 15th. Get my pen, write that in. All right, so that one's the simple one. Fairly simple anyway. Excuse me. Now, these next two have been transposed. Okay, so they're on a different key now. But again, let's look at the relative intervals involved. Okay, so we have a D, starts on D. Up here, it starts on A. So it is in essence gone down a fourth. Okay, D to A. This one is on F, and it has gone up a seventh to E. Okay, so a fourth plus a seventh. Remember, as you add these intervals, 4 plus 7 is 11, but they share a note, and so it's actually the interval of a tenth. So this would be invertible counterpoint at the 10th. That's what you should have gotten there. Again, top voice moves down an octave and a fourth. Don't worry about the octave, a fourth. Lower voice moves up a seventh. A fourth and a seventh is a tenth. All right. And then this last one here, again, we're going back to the original. So we have D moving down to A, it's another fourth. And you have F moving up to C, so it's up a fifth. So a fourth and a fifth is an octave. So this is a invertible counterpoint at the octave. Okay. So again, you could take both of these and put them back in the key of F, and you should end up with the same the same interval. So if you look at number 7, for instance, where it starts here, this one's in basically C major. So if you take it down a fifth, So this is on F. Down that fifth, there's a D. So in essence, what has taken place is the upper voice here would stay the same because it'd be starting here on this F. This voice here would start down here on the D, which should be an octave below where it was. Okay, again, you can get there both ways. I think it's just easier to look at the interval that it moved and add them together, and you should get the same thing. All right. Then, what's numbered? Number 8, actually, it's number 7. But using the example below, write the invertible counterpoint at the 15th. Okay, so there's a few ways to do this. So you could get a few different answers. If you simply take one voice and leave it where it's at. So if you take this bottom voice and you start it over here on, whoops, yeah. If you start it over here on G, where it is, I'm just going to use the first note here. So you start on G and make it the top voice. Now take this, what's the top voice, and move it down 2 octaves because it's at the 15th, right? So take it, move it down a 15th or 2 octaves. So from this B all the way down to this B, okay, and start it there, and then do everything from there. That would be invertible counterpoint at the 15th. Or, let me just change pen colors here, go to blue here, okay? So that's one way to do it. Another way would be to move both of these an octave, okay? But you have to be careful here because notice this one goes down and this one goes up. So you don't want them to cross. So if you move this up to the G up here, and then it would go down, your lowest note would be the C there. So we got to make sure this is going to work. Okay, so move that up an octave, move this one down an octave, so it starts down here on this B here. It would go up to the F, and then the rest of it should be okay. Yeah, so you're okay to do that. So you could either, again, move one voice 2 octaves, move that upper voice down 2 octaves, leave the bottom voice where it's at, or you can take this lower voice, move it up an octave, take the upper voice, move it down an octave, and you still end up with 15th. Other thing you could do is you could take that upper voice and move it up 2 octaves, but then you're writing up here and the ledger line's way up here, so that's not practical for the assignment, but you could in essence do that. But here's the thing, you had to switch relative positions. So if you just simply take this lower voice and move it down 2 octaves, that doesn't work because it's still the lower voice. The lower voice has to become the upper voice. The upper voice has to become the lower voice in order for it to be invertible counterpoint. All right. Well, I hope that all made sense. If you have any questions, feel free to either stop by my office Thursday or Friday and ask me, or send me an email, and I will try to answer that. Your homework for Monday is the invertible counterpoint second worksheet I have. I've got that already posted in D2L, so download that. And you're going to have to get a copy of the Well-Tempered Clavier by Johann Sebastian Bach. And you're going to compare the measures, it says to. The Well-Tempered Clavier was a resource I wanted you to buy for the class, but if you don't have it, our music library does have that as well. So use that worksheet, and you're going to identify some more invertible counterpoint in those musical examples there. And we'll look at those on Monday, and again, get you ready for the exam, which is a week from today. So hope you enjoyed this video lecture, and I will see you soon.